ba 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 da ba da. Social psychology. Ba 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 da ba 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 ba. Social psychology. Social psychology. Social psychology. Alrighty. Stuff on Twitch has been buffering a bunch lately. It's been very annoying to watch. Niels, very annoying. We are going to jump right back into where we stopped, chapter 6. Making inferences about personality. I've got an exam that's due tomorrow, and instead of just reading over the rest of this chapter, it's a little early still. I got my tricks there, moans Senior Brown. Welcome to the chat. Nice to see you. I know how to do things and stuff. You never talk to me no more, so you don't know the things and the stuff that I do. Life has kept you busy with that baby of yours. And wife and all that kind of good stuff. Welcome to Social Psychology with Scott. I'll be your host. I'm Scott. Just warming up a little bit while we wait for people to possibly pop in. See if we're going to see Kristen today. Maybe Alan while he's at work. See if Amber's going to pop in. And some of our friends from across the pond. You know, I've noticed that a lot of big Twitch streamers or social streamers, will oftentimes put like a countdown to the live stream so that way they can get people on. That way they don't have to do this happy little nonsense right at the beginning, but that's okay. It lets me warm up those throaty vocals. But we're going to start in anyway, just because I've got a lot to get through. I've got to do about 120 pages today. Not necessarily on stream, but just to read and to study for my exam tomorrow. It is my second exam of the semester for social psychology, which anyone who's been paying attention knows that I rather greatly enjoy. I wonder... That kind of makes me sad a little bit. I wonder if I can switch that around. Social psychology. There we go. That's better. I'll just glance over onto that side from time to time. Although we can go like that. Alright. We're going to pop over to it. Let's do it. That's kind of hard to see with that white background for the chat. We're still working out chat. You know what we might do? I might play around with that filter a little bit while there is... oh, you know what? It's because I fixed it for the other stream, not for this one. Here we go. Because I actually want that bigger. I wonder what happens if that... Oh, it just cuts it off. I wonder if I can wrap it around. Of course that does that. Width. Let's go down to 400. Oh, hey, that's not bad. Okay, so making the width. Hey, Malik, if you're still watching, actually, you know, I can just type it in. Hello, Chetty Von Chatterton. Let's see if that shows up. Oh, yeah, that's a lot better. So, it's a little counterintuitive. A little bit of drop frames. I think when I kill my Twitch, Paul J. Schmidt, you've got to see this. I don't even know that this was possible. Yeah, of course it's possible. But do you think there is technology that your friend who knows technology doesn't know about? I am the god of all things technology. Moo ah ah ah. I'm going to pop that into 200 and then widen that up. And that should actually make the chat pretty. Ooh, that's kind of hideous. There we go. There we go. And I might actually smallen that up a little bit. You know what? Whatever, dude. You know, that's just rude. But go ahead and keep typing because I'm making some changes to my chat just so that way I can see if it actually fits in a little better and is more legible, because I think that did work pretty darn well. There we go. I'll have to remember to do that on the other menu stream. You know what, that green screen doesn't have all the way, so I'm going to play with that for just another second. How you doing today? I'm actually trying to see if I can find a sitter for tonight, Malik, to catch your show. I feel really badly about not being able to go. Shoot. I just boned that. What was it at? 85. Okay, here's 83. What does 84 look like? That's not bad. That's not bad. No, I'm trying, my man. I'm trying. You can stay. You actually, I think, would find this fascinating. Don't be scared because it says psychology in it. Honestly, of all the people that I know, I think you would like this kind of thing better. Oops. Ignore that. Because it's all about... Oh, you're talking about your show. I got you, not mine. Yeah. No, I got you. Just the... Jenny works till 10:30 tonight. And so I've got M's. So I'm going to see what I can do. I can't make any promises. I'm hoping you're going to have another show soon, aren't you? I misunderstood what you meant. I thought you meant my show, that you wouldn't stay because of the subject was psychology, but I misunderstood. You meant that you understood because it's an R-rated show and me bringing Emma over to see your show. I'm out of town tomorrow night. We've had Ember and I have swing plans over in Ann Arbor. It's called Pirate Swing, and it's the kind of the biggest Michigan swing dance festival, and we've been planning to go for the last like 6 months. So the timing is just awful. That's fine. I enjoy you coming by anyway. Thanks for dropping in and saying hey. I am going to, as this is actually kind of my study process, I go over the chapter and then I get into discussions with the people that are watching, and it's actually turned into some really great and lively discussions about psychology, about people. So I've really enjoyed doing this because of the discussions with the people that I've been able to have versus just, reading it very dryly to myself. You know what we should do is schedule a night to have you over on stream, and then you and I can do like a talk show kind of thing, and we can pop in whatever background you want. Hey, Kristen. Yeah, Twitch is freaking terrible today. I tried using that, and it was just dropping frames left and right. I'd say jump onto either Facebook or YouTube or Mixer. Because check it out, Malik. We could put any background we wanted. Should we be on You're already, oh yeah, I see this symbol now. So I'm like, we should definitely figure out a time to do like a talk show. I think that'd be kind of fun, talking about people. All right. We're going to jump into this, making inferences about personality. When last we left, just as a recap, we were talking about, let's see, we're going to pop over here. We're detecting deception, initial first impression formation. Remember, the research showed that people that introduce themselves using their most positive traits first had a better reception from complete strangers and made a better first impression. Not watering down all of their traits by listing, I'm this and this and this and this, and I love this and I do this, because then people tend to average traits and characteristics. You want to lead with your best, most positive personality traits if you really want to make the best perception. And amusingly enough, describing yourself as warm and being in a warm environment oftentimes makes you be perceived as more friendly and more, I hate to overuse the word, but warmly. So today, again, I have my nice hot, warm cup of coffee. There's no green on that. Oh, I bet it's taking it from, yeah, from the chroma key I have on the chat. So my Pooh Bear mug, given to me by my high school girlfriend. I've kept all this time. So now you all can think very warmly of me, because I am a very warm and generous and gregarious person. Oops, I did not mean to click on that. And then we moved on to causal attribution. So, which is trying to determine if the behavior of a person, which varies from situation to situation versus being an inherent personality trait, to try and discover making that assumption or attribution, whether it is a personal attribution, when we decide that the personality is based off of who they are as a person, versus the situational attribution, whereas the personality is that they're currently portraying is based on the situation they're in. The example being, of course, somebody being in a business networking mixer will oftentimes try to be more outgoing because it's expected and assumed, whereas they may be a very introverted person when they're in more of a social or private setting. And then that leads us right into making inferences about personality. I really got to figure out my green screen situation because it's still reflecting a little bit heavily from that side. I wonder if I drop that down just a little bit, I can cut some of the brightness off the green, and then I won't look quite so sickly. And also, Kristen, I do realize I'm meandering just a little bit, a la talk show hosty. How you doing today? Muck with my microphone real quickly. I've moved it up higher than it should be. There we go. Not Dead, the anthem of the middle-aged. And you're not even middle-aged yet. Only gets worse as you get older. It is easier to make personal attributions in some cases than in others. When a behavior is unusual or unexpected, we can more easily make a personal attribution for it. Imagine that when you go to a party and are introduced to Tess, Tess shakes your hand and says, "Nice to meet you." Oh, we already covered this. Didn't we? We did. Man, I was really far behind in my pages. How do I know? I'm 43. Kristen, I'm middle-aged. Right there. Everything aches. I started waking up about a month ago, and every knuckle in this hand, my dominant hand, I'm left-handed, hurt terribly to where I woke up with a claw like this, and my hand was basically locked. And I've been trying to figure out why, and I think I've nailed it down. Oh, Kristen, I thought you were only like 26, 27 years old. Isn't that what you told me? That is so far back. There we go. All right. All right, all right, all right. $28. All right. I was close. Let's see. Yeah, we did. We got all the way up to detecting the covariation between personality and behavior. I was actually a few more pages ahead. Because we learned that we felt people were more likely to be truthful, just to cover over that inferring personality. People were more likely to be truthful about information about themselves if it was in a setting that was not where they would naturally agree with the conversation or the topic. So if you were, say, an astronaut who inherently needed to be good at being an introvert, said you like being an extrovert, you would more likely believe them because it seems more believable because it is opposite of what is required for that kind of job. All right, detecting the covariation between personality and behavior. So far, we have considered how we make personal attributions when we have only limited information, that is, behavior observed at only a single point in time. A woman leaving a big tip at a restaurant, a man answering questions at a job interview, or a politician giving a speech. But the process of making attributions also occurs when we are able to observe a person's behavior in more than one situation. Certainly, we can learn more about Leslie's generosity if she leaves a big tip in many different restaurants with many different people. And we can learn more about a politician's beliefs by observing the kinds of speeches she gives to different audiences over time. Yeah, what they vote, how they vote. When people have multiple sources of information about the behavior of a person, they can make attributions by assessing the relationship between a person's behavior and the social context in which it occurs. One way of doing so is to use the covariation principle, which states that a given behavior is more likely to have been caused by the situation if that behavior covaries or changes across situations. I think I figured out why, because my pages in the printed version of this are not the same as the pages in the digital PDF. They're a little different. So what that's basically saying for the covariation principle is behavior is more likely to have been caused by the situation if it changes across situations. So if there's no stability in behavior across multiple situations, then it's probably the situation that's causing it. Going back to the, if I'm a politician and I go to a pro-life rally and I'm all rah, 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 pro-life, and then I go to another rally that we'll say is more liberal-based, and then you go, oh, no, we'll make sure that, women's rights for everybody. Then you really know that it's more about the situation than about the person or the personality or the behavior. Our job then is to study the patterns of a person's behavior across different situations in order to help us draw inferences about the causes of that behavior. Research has found that people focus on three kinds of covariation information when they are observing the behavior of others: consistency information, distinctiveness information, and consensus information. The consistency information is a situation that seems to be the cause of the behavior if the situation always produces the behavior. For instance, if I always start crying at weddings and it seems as if the wedding is the cause of the crying. Distinctiveness information. A situation seems to be the cause of a behavior if the behavior occurs when the situation is present, but not when it is not present. For instance, if I only cry at weddings but not any other time, then it seems as if weddings is the cause of my crying. And consensus information. A situation seems to be the cause of the behavior if the situation creates the same behavior in most people, where it would be many people cry at weddings, then it would be the wedding would be the cause. That makes sense. So situationally, if it's consistent, so if you always cry at a wedding, it's the situation. Distinct, so you only cry at weddings but not when there aren't weddings. And consensus, if everybody does it. Consistent, distinct, and consensus. Imagine that your friend Jane likes to go out with a lot of different guys. Oh, Jane, you do get around. And which is fine. There's no judging here. No judging at all. And you have observed her behavior with each of these guys over time. One night she goes to a party with Jimmy. Careful, Jimmy. Wrap it before you tap it. Where you observe something unusual. Although Jane has come to the party with Jimmy, she ignores him all night. She dances with some other guys, and in the end she leaves the party with someone else. This is the kind of situation that might make you wonder about the cause of Jane's behavior. Is she rude? Or is this behavior caused more by Jimmy? And for which you might use the covariation principle to attempt to draw some conclusions. According to the covariation principle, you should be able to determine the cause of Jane's behavior by considering the three types of covariation information: consistency, distinctiveness, and consensus. One question you might ask is whether Jane always treats Jimmy this way when she goes out with him. If the answer is yes, then you might have consistency information. The situation, which is Jimmy's presence, always produces the same behavior. If you notice that Jane ignores Jimmy more than she ignores other men she dates, then you also have distinctiveness information. The behavior is occurring only, or at least more strongly, when Jimmy is present in the situation. Finally, you might look for consensus information too. If the other women Jimmy goes out with also treat him this way, then it seems again that Jimmy is causing behavior. Oh, Jimmy. Can't be like that, Jimmy. You gotta treat the ladies well. Consider one more example. Imagine that a friend of yours tells you that he has just seen a new movie and that is the greatest movie he's ever seen. As you wonder whether you should make an attribution to the situation, which is the movie, you will naturally ask about consensus. Do other people like the movie too? If they do, then you have positive consensus information about how good the movie is. But you probably also have some information about your friend's experiences with movie over time. If you are like me, you probably have friends who love every movie they see. I do know a couple of people that love every bit of trash that comes out into the theater, so not unusual. Whereas I am the hypercritical, people ask me for my opinion on movies when they want to have a negative opinion on a movie. Wah, wah. In this case, for this friend, you probably won't yet be that convinced that it's a great movie. In this case, your friend's reactions would not be distinctive. On the other hand, if your friend does not like most of the movies he sees but loves this one, then the distinctiveness is strong. That's me! People look for me for the distinctiveness when they're looking for movie reviews. The behavior is only occurring in this particular situation. If this is the case, then you can be more certain it's something about the movie that has caused your friend's enthusiasm. So because I dislike so many just poorly made movies, and it's very rare for me to actually enjoy a movie, it is more likely due to the distinctiveness for the covariation principle of my behavior that is actually the situation, in this case the movie, that I like the movie. Not just, I like every movie, which I don't. Your next thought might be, bad taste. Yeah, they also have bad taste. A lot of my friends do. Especially my brother, who never watches these streams, but he has horrible taste in movies. Just atrocious. It's like he's got the movie sense of a 15-year-old boy. If there's shit exploding, then it's a good movie. Michael Bay for life. Get it like tattooed across his chest. Or over his stomach in an arch. Where are we at? Your next thought might be, I'm going to see this movie tonight. You can see still another example of the use of the covariation principle, or covariation information on table 3, using the covariation information. Consensus. All my friends laugh at this TV show. Distinctiveness. Bill laughs more at this TV show than others. Consistency. Bill always laughs more at this TV show than others. Makes sense. I like how they did this. So that's external attribution. It's the situation. For internal attribution, when dealing with behavior for the situation versus behavior for the person. Attributions for success and failure. Still another time when we may use our powers of causal attribution, remember it's causal, not correlational, to help us determine the causes of events is when we attempt to determine why we or others have succeeded or failed at a task. Think back for a moment to the test that you took, or perhaps another task that you performed, and consider why you did well or poorly on it. Then see if your thoughts reflect what Bernard Wiener, like a 12-year-old, I have to laugh at that. Sorry, Mr. Wiener. Sorry. Considered to be important factors in this regard. Researcher was interested in how we determine the causes of success or failure because he felt that this information was particularly important for us. How we determine the cause of success or failure. Accurately determining why we have succeeded or failed will help us see which tasks we're good at already and which we need to work on in order to improve. Oh, for sure. The researcher also proposed that we make these determinations by engaging in causal attribution and that outcomes of our decision-making process were made either to the person, I succeeded or failed because of my own personal characteristics, or to the situation. Not surprising. I succeeded or failed because something happened, not my fault. The analysis is shown in figure 6.5, attributions for success and failure. According to him, success or failure can be seen as coming from personal causes, ability or motivation, or from situational causes, luck or task difficulty. However, he also argued that those personal and situational causes could be either stable, less likely to change over time, or unstable, which are more likely to change over time, for that internal or external locus of control mixed with stability and instability. I'll be right back. I have to grab a tissue really quickly. I'll throw my BRB up, just in case somebody else wanders in while I'm away. Oh, I should have turned off. I like your husband, and I've never even met him, Kristen. Go away, BRB. Oh, you know, I decided, because we're dealing with a professional thing, I'll put a tie on today. How about that? It was one of my favorite ties. I have a stain on my tie. Does anybody know how to get stains out of ties? This one's a polyester blend. Yeah, I'd love to meet that dude. I've been thinking about that. I'd really like to be able to go grab a burger and drinks with you guys some night. Then I can do, an analysis on you, Kristen. Wow. Oops. Tying my damn tie wrong. It's one of those muscle memory things. If I don't do it all in the same order, I screw it up. But today we're going to be using we're making a nice knot. We're making a nice full Windsor, which works really well with this tie because this tie has a good heft and thickness to it. I don't want to hang out with you guys. Why would I not want to get a burger and drinks with you guys? And I found that the ties that actually have a little bit more thickness to them, usually, although I'm not super doing it well here, Do some better dimple in the middle. There we go. There we go. Look at that. Professional AF. Oh, analyze you? Oh, come on now. That's like literally what my entire profession is going to be, is analyzing people. It's not judging people. It's analyzing people. There's a big difference. Right now I can joke about judging people because it's not my profession yet. It's just studying. Oh, good. Um, good, 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 good. My FAFSA was approved for next semester. Now I just got to get into a college. Can of worms. Come on now. Literally, if you can't trust me in this smile, who can you trust? All right. Heading back over on topic here, shall we? The locus of control. We're going to zoom out on this a little bit so I can read it while it's on the screen. If you did well on a test because you were really smart, then this is a personal and stable attribution of ability. It's clearly something that is caused by you personally, and it is also a stable cause. You're smart today, and you'll probably be smart in the future. However, if you succeeded more because you studied hard, then this is success due to motivation. It is again personal. You studied, but it is also unstable. Although you studied really hard for this test, you might not work so hard for the next one. He considered the task difficulty to be situational. A situational cause. You may have succeeded on the test because it was easy, and he assumed that the next test would probably be easy for you too. So whatever it is always hard or easy. Finally, he considered success due to luck. You just guessed a lot of the answers correctly. To be a situational cause, but one that was more unstable than task difficulty. It turns out that although his attribution do not always fit perfectly, example, task difficulty may sometimes change over time and thus be at least somewhat unstable, the four types of information pretty well capture the types of attributions that people make for success or failure. It makes sense. Did I work for it? Am I good at it inherently? Was it difficult? And did I just randomly do well at it? Blow that back up. Are our attributions accurate? Well, that's a fun sentence to say. Are our attributions accurate? A little assonance and alliteration there. We have seen that person perception is useful in helping us successfully interact with others. If we can figure out why our roommate is angry at us, we can respond appropriately to resolve the problem. And if we can determine why we did so poorly on the last psychology test, we can try to prepare differently so we can do better on the next test. Because successful navigation of the social world is based on being accurate, we can expect that our attributional skills will be pretty good. Sorry, moving stuff off of my pile. However, although people are reasonably accurate in their attributions, we could say perhaps that they are good enough. They're far from perfect. In fact, and I doubt this is going to surprise you, causal attributions are subject to the same types of biases that any other types of social judgments are. Let's consider some of the ways that our attributions may go awry. Overemphasizing the role of the person. One way that our attributions are biased is that we're often too quick to attribute the behavior of people to something personal about them rather than something about their situation. That makes sense. If something goes wrong for somebody, oftentimes for people that I've known, it will be it's because that person's a dumbass, instead of, oh, that situation was really difficult, I should cut them some slack, which we could all do. This is a classic example of the general human tendency of underestimating how important the social situation really is in determining behavior. This bias occurs in two ways. First, we are too likely to make strong personal attributions to account for the behavior that we observe others beginning in. That is, we're more likely to say, Leslie left a big tip, so she must be generous, then Leslie left a big tip, but perhaps this was because she was trying to impress her friends. Second, we also tend to make more personal attributions about the behavior of others. We tend to say Leslie is a generous person than we do for ourselves. We tend to say I am generous in situations, but not in others. Let's consider each of these biases, the fundamental attribution error and actor-observer difference in turn. When we explain the behavior of others, we tend to overestimate the role of the person factors and overlook the impact of the situation. In fact, the tendency to do so is so common it is known as the fundamental attribution error or correspondence bias. Fundamental attribution error, correspondence bias. So when we attribute it due to the person and not the situation. In one demonstration of the fundamental attribution error, researchers had participants read a brief story about a professor who had selected 2 student volunteers to come up in front of a class to participate in a trivia game. The students were described as having randomly assigned to the role of a quizmaster or contestant by drawing straws. The quizmaster was asked to generate 5 questions from his idiosyncratic knowledge with the stipulation that he knew the correct answer to all 5 questions. The quizmaster subsequently posed his questions to the other student. For example, he asked, what cowboy movie sidekick is Smiley Burnett? Stan looked puzzled and finally replied, I don't know. The only movie cowboy that pops into mind for me is John Wayne. Joe asked 4 additional questions and Stan was described as answering only 1 of the 5 questions correctly. After reading the story, the students were asked to indicate their impression of both Stan's and Joe's intelligence. If you think about the setup here, you'll notice that the professors create a situation that we can have a big influence on the outcomes. Joe has a huge advantage because he got to choose the questions. So we might actually think, because of this situation, that Joe, the quizmaster, is more intelligent than Stan. But keeping in mind that that situation is inherently biased for the quizmaster, because if he comes up with questions from his own knowledge base, there's no control over what average people or even above average, below average people might know. As a result, the questions are hard for the contestant to answer. But did the participants realize that the situation was the cause of the outcomes? They did not. Rather, the students rated Joe as significantly more intelligent than Stan. You can imagine that Joe just seemed to be really smart to the students after all. He knew all the answers, whereas Stan only knew 1 of 5. But of course, this is a mistake. The difference, it was not at all due to the person factors, but completely to the situation. Again, this is the fundamental attribution error, when we think of it as the person, not the situation. Joe got to use his own personal store of esoteric knowledge to create the most difficult questions he could think of. The observers committed the fundamental attribution error and did not sufficiently take the quizmaster's situational advantage into account. The fundamental attribution error involves a bias in how easily and frequently we make personal versus situational attributions to others. Another similar way that we overemphasize the power of the person is that we tend to make more personal attributions for the behavior of others than we do for ourselves, and to make more situational attributions for our own behavior than that of others. Wasn't my fault, it was the situation I was in. And that is the actor. Did I change pages already? That was the actor-observer difference. Yeah, Kristen, strange to think how we all do that. In all honesty, I oftentimes, while reading the homework and the assignments and that kind of stuff, I've begun to feel like such a jerk because I'm now reading about stuff that I have done wrong in the past a number of times. And so I'm actively trying to lead a better life and be a better person from learning this stuff in these textbooks. It's like, holy crap, I didn't know I was doing that. And then because I'm so stubborn as I am, I'm like, God damn it, I'm not going to be like every other piece of sheep that's walking around out there. I'm going to be better than everybody else. So much relevant info than all the BS. Yeah. I guess, I've got my bachelor's in business administration, graduated magna cum laude. And honestly, so much of that felt like business doublespeak and manager bullshit that it was very difficult for me to want to continue going to school for it because of how disingenuous all of it seemed. Whereas I'm really loving psychology because it feels more genuine. Like, we have observed this, we know this works, this is how you can be a better person, this is how other people can be better towards you, and you can, affect your own life. Not necessarily through manipulation of other people, but of manipulation of the situation that would create a better situation for everybody. At least that's how I'm taking it. Yeah, example being, if I know going into a meeting that the person I'm going to meeting with is a huge jackass, then I can try and tailor the conversation to help him or her be a better, have a better feeling towards me, which then might actually make it better for both of us. Yeah, actual life skills. You never taught how to balance a budget in school, but man, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Right? No offense to science people, but the entire world doesn't need to know how to do science. Make it a lot harder for you to get a job if they did. All right. When we are asked about the behavior of other people, we tend to quickly make trait attribution. Oh, Sarah, she's really shy. On the other hand, when we think of ourselves, we're more likely to take the situation into account. We tend to say, well, I'm shy in psychology discussion class, but with my baseball friends, I'm not shy at all. So therefore, it's the situation. When our friend behaves in a helpful way, we naturally believe that she's a friendly person. But when we behave in the same way, on the other hand, we realize that there may be a lot of other reasons why we did what we did. Yeah. I don't regret my bachelor's in business administration. I just, because, you can't, first of all, it's pointless to regret the last 20 years. I can't go back and change it. And I've learned a lot of lessons and I've met a lot of great people and I've had a lot of great life experiences. It just didn't work out how I was hoping it would, where I'm at in life so far. Kind of starting over at 43 is not the ideal situation for a grown-ass man. For real and for true and for sure. You might be able to get a feel for the actor-observer difference by taking the following short quiz. First, think about a person you know, your mom, roommate, someone in one of your classes. Then for each row, circle which one of the three choices best describes his or her personality. Then answer the questions again, but this time about yourself. Very true. We're not going to bother doing that because we already know we all do it. Researchers had college students complete exactly this task. They did it for themselves, for their best friend, for their father, or for the newscaster Walter Cronkite. As you can see, the actor-observer difference, the participants checked one of the two trait terms more often for other people than they did for themselves, and checked off depends on the situation more frequently for themselves than they did for the other person. This is the actor-observer difference. An actor, in this case, obviously not meaning actor as if somebody on a stage, but actor is in terms of the person who is acting on the situation. Self-trait depends on the situation. Best friend, more about them. Father, more about them. Walter Cronkite, more about them. Like the fundamental attribution error, the actor-observer difference reflects our tendency to overweight the personal explanations of the behavior of other people. However, recent meta-analysis in 2006, not really recent, has suggested that the actor-observer difference might not be as strong as the fundamental attribution error is and may only be likely to occur for some people. I mean, I can buy that. I oftentimes say mea culpa. I am very good about accepting when I have done something wrong. The thing that kills me is I hate that other people are not. I know I have several friends or have had in the past and even relationships where despite me saying, this is what I've done wrong, I am sorry, your turn, it is, you should be, or I agree that this was something you did wrong. And it's never wouldn't be the right word, but oftentimes it is, I feel very cheated in the fact that the blame gets placed onto my shoulders because I'm the one that has accepted the blame. So I would really like it if people that I know to go, oh, mea culpa as well. Look how giant that nose looks when I'm angled this way. There we go. Sorry, webcams. The tendency to overemphasize personal attribution seems to occur for several reasons. One reason is simply because other people are so salient in our social situations. When I look at you, I see you as my focus, and so I'm likely to make personal attributions about you. It's just easy because I'm looking right at you. When I look at Leslie giving that big tip, I see her, so I decide it's she who caused the action. When I think of my own behavior, however, I do not see myself, but am more focused on my situation. That makes sense. Perception is reality. So because this is what I see, this is how I perceive it, therefore this is what is real. And since you don't really see yourself in this situation, you only see the situation, that could very well bias the behavior or the belief. I can remember the other times I didn't give a big tip, so I concluded my behavior is caused by the situation than by my personality. In fact, research has shown that we tend to make more personal attributions for the people we're directly observing in our environments than for people who are part of a situation, but who we're not directly watching. Must be the situation if I can't see them in it. A second reason for the tendency to make so many personal attributions is they're simply easier to make than situational attributions. In fact, personal attributions seem to be made spontaneously without any effort on our part, and even on the basis of only very limited behavior. Personal attributions just pop into mind before situational attributions do. Probably just how the schema work in our brains. We got to get the information out as quickly as possible. Third, personal attributions also dominate because we need to make them in order to understand a situation. That is, we cannot make either a personal attribution, Leslie is generous, or situational attribution, Leslie is trying to impress her friends, until we have first identified the behavior as being a generous behavior. Leaving that big tip was a generous thing to do. So we end up starting with the personal attribution, and only later try to correct or adjust our judgment. Adjusting our judgment generally takes more effort than making the original judgment does, and the adjustment is frequently not sufficient. We are more likely to commit the fundamental attribution error, quickly jumping to the conclusion that behavior is called by the underlying personality when we are tired, distracted, or busy doing other things. It's your fault because I am tired. I hope you might have noticed that there is an important moral about perceiving others that applies here. I'm going to highlight that. We should not be too quick to judge other people. I think that's a fundamental thing for psychology and psychologists. And I can definitely see as therapists getting into the trap of, oh, I think I know so much about everyone, therefore I can instantly judge everyone. And I wonder how much that actually harms the industry. People go in kind of bearing themselves nakedly to a therapist, only to have a therapist who maybe having a shitty day, didn't get much sleep, got into an argument with somebody, didn't like their previous patient, and they apply that over to the new patient, to you. I would be interested in seeing a study on that. How therapists interact with patients based off of the order of the patients in the day and the fundamental behaviors and attitudes towards the previous patient. Interesting stuff. It is easy to think that poor people are lazy, that people who harm someone else are mean, and that people who say something harsh are rude or unfriendly. But these attributions may frequently overemphasize the role of the person. This can sometimes result in overly harsh evaluations of people who don't really deserve them. We tend to blame the victim, even for events that they can't really control. Oof, shouldn't blame the victim. Sometimes people are lazy, mean, or rude, but they may also be the victims of situations. When you find yourself making strong personal attribution for the behaviors of others, your experience as a social psychologist should lead you to stop and think more carefully. Look at that. Yep, Kristen, I agree. I think everybody's like that. The call you make after a really bad call isn't as good as it should be. You're mad at yourself, and then you project that right onto the next thing that you're doing, possibly unfortunate person. Would you want other people to make personal attributions for your behavior in the same situation, or would you prefer that they more fully consider the situation surrounding behavior? Are you perhaps making the fundamental attribution error? Self-serving attributions. You may recall that the process of making causal attributions is supposed to proceed in a careful, rational, and even scientific manner. But this assumption turns out to be at least in part untrue. Our attributions are sometimes biased by affect, particularly the fundamental desire to enhance the self. Although we would like to think that we are always rational and accurate in our attributions, we often tend to distort them to make us feel better. Self-serving attributions are attributions that help us meet our desires to see ourselves positively. You could maybe, and we'll see if I'm thinking this properly. So going back to the Leslie is a big tipper, I'm going to assume Leslie is a generous person, and that's why she leaves a big tip, in order to view myself as a better person by having good, generous friends. Let's see how it plays out. I have noticed that I sometimes make self-enhancing attributions. If my students do well on one of my exams, I make a personal attribution for their success. I am, after all, a great teacher. On the other hand, when my students do poorly on an exam, I tend to make a situational attribution. I blame them for their failure. Why didn't you guys study harder? You can see this process is clearly not the type of scientific, rational, and careful process that attribution theory suggests I should be following. It's unfair, although it does make me feel better about myself. If I were really acting like a scientist, however, I would determine ahead of time what causes good or poor exam scores and make the appropriate attribution regardless of the outcome. You might have noticed yourself making self-serving attributions too. Perhaps you have blamed another driver for an accident that you were in, or blamed your partner rather than yourself for a breakup. Most of my breakups have been at least 50% my part. At least 50% my part. Some of them more so. Or perhaps you were taking credit internal for your success, but blamed your failures on external causes. If these judgments were somewhat less inaccurate, even though they did benefit you, they are indeed self-serving. Key takeaways. Causal attribution is a process of trying to determine the causes of people's behavior. Attributions are made to make personal or situation causes. It is easier to make personal attributions when the behavior is unusual or unexpected, and when people are perceived to have chosen to engage in it, such as, I picked this topic to write an essay on. I picked this career despite my personality differences with it. The covariation principle proposes that we use consistency information, distinctiveness information, and consensus information to draw inferences about the causes of behavior. According to Mr. Wiener, success or failure can be seen as coming from either personal or situational causes, and our attributional skills are good enough but not perfect. The pile of pages in the chapter grow ever shorter. Kristen, you'll have heard me read something like 50 pages of social psychology text to you. And I am really glad you stopped by today. I would have been a little bummed if I was just reading to myself. Although it's a little unfair to say I'm always glad when you stop by. So it isn't just. It's been an hour so far. Not too bad. Be a bit boring? Which part of the statement was a bit boring? Just me reading to myself? Yeah, that would be a bit boring. Because I can plow through reading this stuff way faster if I just read to myself. But I love the interaction. Is Twitch down today? Let me just pop on and see. Nope. There's my big ugly mug up on that screen. 6.3. Hmm. 6.3 is kind of the last part, and then the last two, 6.4 and 6.5, are just summary statements. So we're going to... Is it cut out at all on YouTube? Nice. All right. Individual and cultural differences in person perception. To this point, we have focused on how appearance, behaviors, and traits of the people we encounter influence our understanding of the people. It makes sense that this would be our focus because of the emphasis within social psychology on the social situation. In this case, the people we are judging. But the person is also important, so let's consider some of the person variables that influence how we judge other people. Perceiver characteristics. Let's get into the biases. So far, we've assumed that the different perceivers will all form pretty much the same impression of the same person. For instance, if you and I are both thinking about our friend Janetta, or describing her to someone else, we should each think about or describe her in pretty much the same way. After all, Janetta is Janetta, and she should have a personality that you and I can both see. Well, we know this isn't going to be true. But this is not always the case. You and I may form different impressions of Janetta, and for a variety of reasons. For one, my experiences with Janetta are somewhat different than yours. I see her in different places, talk to her about different things, and thus will have a different sample of behavior on which to base my impressions. But you and I might even form different impressions of Janetta if we see her performing exactly the same behavior. To every experience, each of us brings our own schemas, attitudes, and expectations. In fact, the process of interpretation guarantees that we will not all form exactly the same impression of the people we see. This, of course, reflects a basic principle that we have discussed throughout the book. Our prior experiences color our current perceptions. I am who I am, my life, and I view it through that lens. And you will do the same despite both of us perceiving the same situation, which is a little scary if you think about the number of court cases that rely on eyewitnesses. One perceiver factor that influences how we perceive others is current cognitive accessibility of a given personal characteristic. That is the extent to which a person characteristic quickly and easily comes to mind for the perceiver. Remember, cognitive just means thinking, so cognitive accessibility is how quickly something pops into your thinking of that person. Differences in the accessibility will lead to different people to attend to different aspects of the other person. Some people first notice how attractive someone is because they care a lot about physical appearance. For them, appearance is a highly accessible characteristic. Others pay more attention to a person's race or religion, and still others attend to a person's height or weight. Yeah, very unreliable for eyewitnesses. Terrifying. False confessions. Yeah, our court system really needs. But what else can you do? It's not like there are cameras around recording everything all of the time that you can like fly around in 3D to see how every situation actually was. Still terrifying. If you're interested in style and fashion, you would probably first notice a person's clothes, whereas another person might be more likely to notice one's athletic skills. You can see from these differences in accessibility will influence the kinds of impressions that we form about others because they influence what we focus on and how we think about them. In fact, when people are asked to describe others, there is often more overlap in the descriptions provided by the same perceiver about different people than there is going to start that one over. In fact, when people are asked to describe others, there's often more overlap in the descriptions provided by the same perceiver about different people than there is provided by different perceivers about the same person. So in other words, I will routinely describe other people multiple different people in the same way, whereas other people may describe that person differently than I do. If you care a lot about fashion, you'll describe all your friends on that dimension, whereas if I care about athletic skills, I'll tend to describe all my friends on the basis of athletic qualities. These differences reflect the different emphasis that we as observers place on the characteristics of others rather than the real differences of those people. So, example being, if you were to see two equally athletic, we'll just say beach volleyball, we'll say female Olympic beach volleyball players. And one is still wearing those super skimpy beach volleyball outfit, and the other one is wearing, we'll say, a sundress. You could have two people describe them. One as she's extremely athletic, whereas the other one had, or they're both extremely athletic, whereas one you could say, or somebody else might describe it as, one has a good sense in fashion, the other one doesn't wear something good at all. Although I suppose the beach volleyball outfit would be a poor choice. We'll just say jeans and a t-shirt versus a pretty sundress. I might notice athleticism. You might notice their outfits and judge them completely differently from there. Interesting stuff. Kind of makes me want to... Kristen, can you have me as a guest over at Jackson? Can I come... Can you have meetings in your office? Invite me over to have a meeting in your office and we can just sit there and social psychology people? That would be fun. That'd be fun, don't you think? Individual difference exists not only in the depth of attributions, but also in the types of attributions we tend to make about both ourselves and others. Some people tend to believe that people's traits are fundamentally stable and incapable of change. We call these people entity theorists. Entity theorists tend to focus on the traits of people and tend to make a lot of personal attributions. On the other hand, incremental theorists are those who believe that personalities change a lot over time, and therefore we are more likely to make situational attributions for events. I can visit, but NKT chill in my cube. I don't know what NKT means. Oh, probably not chill in your cube. I got you. I thought you had an office. Don't you have a really big office with windows and stuff? Did I skip something? I did. I skipped a whole paragraph. We're going to go back. So entity theorists are people that believe that others' traits are stable and don't typically change, whereas incremental theorists believe that people's personality changes over time and are based more on the situation. We're going to jump back a paragraph that I completely skipped. People also differ in terms of how carefully they process information about others. Some people have a strong need to think about and understand others. I'm sure you know people like this. They want to know why something went wrong or right, or just to know more about anyone with whom they interact. Need for cognition refers to the tendency to think carefully and fully about social situations. I have a tendency to do that when I'm trying to weigh situations that are businessy or tight on a relationship fashion. People with a strong need for cognition tend to process information more thoughtfully and therefore may make more causal attributions overall. In contrast, people without a strong need for cognition tend to be more impulsive and impatient and may make attributions more quickly and spontaneously. Although the need for cognition refers to a tendency to think carefully and fully about any topic, there are also individual differences in the tendency to be interested in people more specifically. For instance, researchers found that psychology majors were more curious about people than were natural sciences majors. Well, that makes sense. In one relevant study, researchers found that when forced to make judgments quickly, people who had been classified as entity theorists were nevertheless still able to make personal attributions about others, but were not able to easily encode the situational causes of the behavior. On the other hand, when forced to make judgments quickly, the people who were classified as incremental theorists were better able to make use of situational aspects of the scene than the personality of the actors. I mean, it makes sense. It's kind of the basis of their theorists. Individual differences in attributional styles can also influence our own behavior. Entity theorists are more likely to have difficulty when they move on to new tasks because they don't think they'll be able to adapt to the new challenge. Incremental theorists, on the other hand, are more optimistic and do better in such challenging environments because they believe the personality can adapt to a new situation. That would definitely be me. I always think I can handle new situations. My ego demands that I am able to handle anything. You can see that these differences in how people make attributions can help us understand both how we think about ourselves and others and how we respond to our own social contexts. Research focus, how our attributions can influence our school performance. How about you, Kristen? Are you more an entity theorist or an incremental one? Do you tend to view personality of people as stable? They were a dick. They are a dick. They will always be a dick. Or they were a dick, but the situation was hard for them. They are a dick now. The situation is still hard, but in the future they may be less of a dick because they may have improved their situation. We'll get back to you when you answer. Researchers tested, there we go. You give a lot of second chances. So then I think inherently that would have to be a situational thing, because if you believe, you wouldn't really give a second chance to somebody you believed was specifically doing something badly, would you? Researchers tested whether the types of attributions students make on their own characteristics might influence their school performance. They assessed the attributional tendencies and the math performance of 373 junior high students at a public school in New York when they first entered the 7th grade. The students all completed a measure of attributional styles. Those who tended to agree with statements such as, you have a certain amount of intelligence and you really can't do much to change it, were classified as entity theorists, where those who agreed more with statements as, you can always greatly change how intelligent you are, were classified as incremental theorists. It goes along with it. Then the researchers measured the students' math grades at the end of the fall and spring terms in 7th and 8th grades. As you can see in the following figure, the researchers found that the students who were classified as incremental theorists improved their math scores significantly more than the entity students. It seems that the incremental theorists really believed that they could improve their skills and were actually able to do it. These findings confirm that how we think about traits can have a substantial impact on our own behavior. Definitely true there. Or I would think that is true because I thrive in chaos and I love new situations. I do get a little nervous when going into stuff that I've never done before, but because I am so bullheaded, I just kind of plow through until I can figure it out and do it right. Cultural differences in person perception. As we've seen many places in the book, the culture we live has a significant impact on the way we think about and perceive the world, and thus it is not surprising that people in different cultures would tend to think about people at least somewhat differently. One difference is between people from Western cultures, US, Canada, Australia, and people from East Asian cultures, Japan, Taiwan, China, Korea, and India. People from Western cultures tend to be primarily oriented towards individualism, tend to think about themselves as different from and better than the people in their environment, and believing that other people make their own decisions or are responsible for their own actions. In contrast, people in many East Asian cultures take a more collectivistic view of people that emphasize not so much the individual, but rather the relationship between individuals and the other people and things that surround them. The outcome of these differences is that on average, people from individualistic cultures tend to focus more on the individual person, whereas again, on average, people from collectivist cultures tend to focus on the situation. Not surprising. I do have traits that are more about the individual, but I'm getting better about trying to see it as who they were as a person plus the situation they are in, which who knows, maybe that'll make me a good therapist, good psychologist. In one study demonstrating this difference, the researcher asked children and adults in India, the collectivist culture, and the United States, the individual culture, to indicate the causes of negative actions by other people. Although the youngest children, ages 8 and 11, did not differ, the older children, age 15, and the adults did. Americans made more personal attributions, whereas Indians made more situational attributions for the same behavior. Researchers asked American and Japanese students to describe what they saw in the images like the one shown below. They found that while both groups talked about the most salient objects, the fish, which were brightly colored and swimming around, the Japanese students also tended to talk and remember more about the images in the background. They remembered the frog and the plants as well as the fish. He's a cute little frog. I like the snail too. Boop, boop, boop. And the bubbles. Researchers and his colleagues, researchers investigated the role of culture on person perception in a different way. By focusing on people who are bicultural, who have knowledge about two different cultures in their research, they used high school students living in Hong Kong. Although traditional Chinese values are emphasized in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong was a British administrated territory for more than a century, it's 100 years for you people bad with math, the students there were also acculturated, never used that word before, that's really hard coming off the lips, with Western social beliefs and values. Morris and colleagues first randomly assigned the students to one of three priming conditions. Participants in the American culture, priming conditions saw pictures of American icons, U.S. Capitol building, American flag, and then wrote 10 sentences about American culture. Participants in the Chinese culture, priming conditions saw 8 Chinese icons, such as Chinese dragon, Great Wall of China, and then wrote 10 sentences about Chinese culture. Finally, participants in the control condition saw pictures of natural landscapes and wrote 10 sentences about the landscapes. Then participants in all conditions read a story about an overweight boy who was advised by a physician not to eat food with high sugar content. One day, and his friends went to a buffet dinner where a delicious-looking cake was offered. Despite its high sugar content, he ate it. After reading the story, the participants were asked to indicate the extent to which the boy's weight problem was caused by his personality, personal attribution, or by the situation, situational attribution. The students who had been primed with symbols about American culture gave relatively less weight to the situation rather than the personal factors in comparison with the students who had been primed with Chinese culture symbols. In still another test of cultural differences in perception, researchers analyzed the statements made by athletes and by the news media regarding the winners of medals in the 2000 and 2002 Olympics. They found the athletes in China described themselves more in terms of the situation. They talked about the importance of their coaches, managers, and spectators in helping them do well. Whereas American athletes, can you guess, focused on themselves. Taken together, we can see that cultural and individual differences play a similar role in person perception as they do in social psychological areas. Although most people tend to use the same basic person perception process, and although we can understand these processes by observing the communalities among people, the outcomes of person perception will also be determined, at least in part, by the characteristics of the person himself or herself, and these differences are often created by the culture in which the person lives. I like the pages with lots of pictures because it makes it feel like we're going through it very fast. Attributional styles and mental health. As we've seen in this chapter, how we make attributions about other people have a big influence on our reactions to them. But we also make attributions for our own behaviors. Social psychologists have discovered that there are important individual differences in the attributions that people make to the negative events that they experience, and that these attributions can have a big influence on how they respond to them. I feel like I know where this is going. The same negative event can create anxiety and depression in one individual but have virtually no effect on someone else. And still another person may see a negative event as a challenge to try even harder to overcome the difficulty. A major determinant of how we react to perceived threats in the attributions that we make to them. Try that one again. A major determinant of how we react to perceived threats is the attributions that we make to them. Attributional style, because it's bold, we highlight it, refers to the type of attributions that we tend to make for the events that occur to us. These attributions can be our own characteristics or situational, but attributions can also be made on other dimensions, including stable versus unstable, or global versus specific. Stable attributions are those that we think will be relatively permanent, whereas unstable attributions are expected to change over time. Global attributions are those that we feel apply broadly to everybody, whereas specific attributions are those causes that we see as more unique to specific events. You may know some people who tend to make negative or pessimistic attributions to negative events that they experience. We say that these people have negative attribution style. These people explain negative events by referring to their own internal, stable, and global qualities. People with negative attribution style say things such as the following: I failed because I am no good. I always fail. I fail at everything. You might well imagine the result of negative attributional style is a sense of hopelessness and despair. Researchers found that college students who indicate they have negative attributional styles when they first came to college were more likely than those who had more positive style to experience an episode of depression within the next few months. Interesting. Again, it goes back to how we perceive things perception creates reality for ourselves, and in some cases shapes reality for others. I'm not good enough, therefore I'm going to fail, therefore I failed. I am good enough, I can handle it, therefore I did handle it. Well, Kristen, negative Nancy, guess you're learning something here. Instead of always assuming that it's going to be bad, assume it's good. Even if it doesn't work out to be as good as you want, it might work out to be better than it would have otherwise. That sounded like good advice. I should be on my own talk show late at night. People who have extremely negative attributional styles in which they continually make external, stable, and global attributions for their behavior are said to be experiencing learned helplessness. And although that wasn't covered yet in this class, it was covered in several other classes where basically learned helplessness is the belief that even though you could make a change, you believe that you cannot, therefore you don't. That was tested or researched very heavily in the Stanford Prison Experiment, if you've ever read about that. People, despite having unlocked doors and the ability to leave at any time, a lot of the participants believed they were not allowed to leave, and so they got learned helplessness from it. I'm going to have to shut one of my blinds as the sun is now very bright in my face. Whoa. Boop. I have come back. Might be a little too dark. Let's brighten that up there. There we go. There we go. I had to fix that chair a little bit too. Learned helplessness was first demonstrated in research that found that some dogs were strapped into a harness and exposed to painful electric shocks, became passive, and gave up trying to escape from the shock, even in new situations in which the harness had been removed and escape was therefore possible. Similarly, some people who were exposed to bursts of noise later failed to stop the noise when they were actually able to do so. In short, learned helplessness is the tendency to make external rather than internal attributions for our behaviors. Those who experience learned helplessness do not feel that they have any control over their own outcomes and are more likely to have a variety of negative health outcomes. Oh. So bright. Now the green is reflecting from my green screen onto the wall, back onto me. Stockholm Syndrome. No, that's a little different. Stockholm Syndrome, I mean, it shares some similarities, but that's more of when you identify with your captor. Either fall in love with or change your belief system to match theirs. Your brain has basically accepted theirs is the only way, therefore it must to get out of the situation you're in. I mean, some similarities. Another type of attributional technique that people sometimes use to help them feel better about themselves is known as self-handicapping. Self-handicapping occurs when we make statements about or engage in behaviors that help us create a convenient external attribution for potential failure. Yeah, it does seem to go hand in hand for sure. For instance, in researchers, participants first performed an intelligence test on which they did very well. It was then explained to them that the researchers were testing the effects of different drugs on performance, and they would be asked to take a similar but potentially more difficult intelligence test while they were under the influence of one of two different drugs. The participants were given a choice. They could take a pill that was supposed to facilitate performance on the intelligence task, making it easier for them to perform, or a pill that was supposed to inhibit performance on the intelligence task, thereby making the task harder to perform. No drugs were actually administered. Researchers found that men, but not women, engaged in self-handicapping. They preferred to take the performance-inhibiting rather than the performance-enhancing drug, choosing the drug that would provide a convenient external attribution for potential failure. I kind of wonder how many subjects they use for this, because it seems a little odd across gender lines there. I can't imagine all men would do that. Interestingly enough, the very first thing I thought was I wanted to take the one that would make me do better on the test. Although women may also self-handicap, particularly by indicating they're unable to perform well due to stress or time constraints, men seem to do it more frequently. This is consistent with general gender differences we've talked about in many places in the book. On average, men are more concerned about maintaining their self-esteem and social status in the eyes of themselves and others than are women. That seems weird. I don't really know any. Hey, Harley Q. How you doing? Hey, Zeb. Zeb. Love those skull balls. No alerts on the stream. Oh, you know I'm not much of a streamer. I saw those the other day when I was looking at the setup on Slobs, but I didn't play with them yet. Maybe later. That would be kind of neat to see, like, going across the screen. The thing also is this is multi-streaming to Facebook and YouTube and Mixer and Twitch, so I don't know how that would work. Hey, Rozenka, Stormy, and Zeb, thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, just for you, you know what? I'm going to make a ticket for myself to actually set up the stream alerts so other people can see when you guys do something like that, because I do appreciate, even if people don't stick around, I do appreciate having people come by and say hi. Yeah, but as I was saying, I don't really know any men that really care about their social status. I don't know if it's just the cohort that I'm in, or what. But like, I don't care about social status. I want more just a happy, healthy life for myself and my friends and family than really caring what other people think of me. And it almost seems to me counterintuitive, because if you take a look, like Instagram models and whatnot, you get a high concentration of women. Metrosexuals may care about social status. You care about your Twitch social status? I can see that. You know what? There are different situations. Excellent with what we were just talking about today, the social situation versus personal attribution. You can see that there are some benefits, but of course, some costs of self-handicapping. If we fail after we self-handicap, we simply blame the failure on the external factor. Wasn't my fault. It was a situation. We knew it going into it. But if we succeed despite the handicap that we have created for ourselves, we can make clear internal attributions for our success. Hey, despite that it sucked, I still did it because I'm great. But engaging in behaviors that create self-handicapping can be costly because they make it harder for us to succeed. In fact, research has found that people report that they self-handicap regularly show lower life satisfaction, less competence, poor moods, less interest in their jobs, and even more substance abuse. The manscaping? Yeah, definitely, Harley. I do a little manscaping myself just to keep things nice for, the lady friends. I don't want to be hideous to look upon. I don't know if that's necessarily social status, but it can aid in social status for sure. Although self-handicapping would seem to be useful for insulating our feelings from failure, it is not a good tack to take in the long run. So although it might help us feel better about ourselves because we failed and it wasn't our fault, looks like it'll lead to a chain reaction of failures. But if you're hideous and still find love, then clean up. It's the whole Beauty and the Beast syndrome. Well, I am pretty hideous, but I do try to clean up. Fortunately, not all people have such negative attributional styles. In fact, most people tend to have more positive ones. Styles that are related to high positive self-esteem and a tendency to explain the negative events they experience by referring to external, unstable, and specific qualities. Thus, people with positive attributional styles are likely to say things such as the following. I failed because the task was difficult. I will do better next time. I failed in this domain, but I'm good in other things. So just because it didn't go the way you wanted doesn't mean future things can't go that way. Nice, healthy, positive outlook. In sum, we can say that people who make more positive attributions toward the negative events than that they experience will persist longer at tasks, and that this persistence can help them. But there are limits to the effectiveness of this strategies. We cannot control everything, and trying to do so can be stressful. We can change some things, but not others. Thus, sometimes the important thing is to know when it's better to give up, stop worrying, and just let things happen. That is so true. Sometimes you've got to just realize that where you're at, that track that you're on, isn't a good one, and it isn't going to the destination that you thought it would. So you need to give up on that and move to something that's healthier and better for you in your life. Unrealistic optimism is a tendency to be overly positive about the likelihood that negative things will occur to us and that we'll be able to effectively cope with them if they do. I kind of have that a little bit, as I always assume that I can handle everything. I don't believe I don't know, man, that's actually pretty close. To be overly positive about the likelihood that negative things will occur. That has happened because I have focused a lot on the negative stuff that's happened in my life, and blame myself for the failures, even though I have been able to keep going and keep moving forward. So I do have a little bit of unrealistic optimism in the fact. However, I do always manage to keep moving forward and cope with them with a couple of minor stumbles. When we are too optimistic, we may set ourselves up for failure and depression when things do not work out as we had hoped. Oh, Jesus, that is exactly what happened. We may think that we are immune to the potential negative outcomes of driving while intoxicated or practicing unsafe sex. Not those. But these optimistic beliefs are not healthy. Fortunately, most people have a reasonable balance between optimism and realism. They tend to set goals that they believe they can attain and regularly make some progress toward reaching them. Researchers found that setting reasonable goals and feeling that we're moving towards them makes us happy, even if we may not in fact attain those goals themselves. Key takeaways. Because we each use our own expectations and our judgment, people may form different impressions of the same person exhibiting the same behavior. Who I am as a person influences how I perceive you. Individual differences in the cognitive accessibility of a given personal characteristic may lead to more overlap in the descriptions. So because I like fashion or athleticism, I may describe another person more in those terms than, say, someone who viewed intelligence or personal grooming. People with a strong need for cognition make more causal attributions overall. Entity theorists tend to focus on the traits of the people and make a lot of personal attributions, whereas incremental theorists tend to believe that personalities change over time. People from Western cultures tend to make more personal attributions, where collectivistic cultures tend to make more situational explanations for the behaviors, and individual differences in attributional styles can influence how we respond to negative events that we experience. People who have extremely negative attributional styles in which they continually make external, stable, and global attributions for the behavior are said to be experiencing learned helplessness, whereas self-handicapping is an attributional technique that prevents us from making ability attributions for our own failures, and having a positive outlook is healthy but must be tempered. We can't be unrealistic about it. Last couple of pages for the chapter. Oops, we're on to 6.4. Getting to the end of the line here, folks. Which isn't too bad, as I have to, unfortunately, I've got to plow through 2 more chapters tonight. Something like 80 to 100 pages. That I got to take an exam on tomorrow. That one we're actually going to skip because that's just thinking like a social psychologist, which is just kind of a recap of everything we've already read. Basically, try to take personal attributes and behaviors, align them with the situation the person might be in that you are either doing research or therapy with, but keeping in mind also that your own personal behaviors, views, life experiences may also influence your perception of the other people. Chapter summary. Person perception helps us make accurate and informed judgments about how other people are likely to respond to us. At the same time, we're exercising our person perception skills on other people. Those same people are also using the powers of person perception to form impressions of us. Our initial impressions of other people can be formed quite accurately in a very short time, sometimes in a matter of seconds. Fred from Scooby-Doo. You know what? He had a cravat. And if you want to send me a cravat, I will wear it on stream. These initial judgments are made on the basis of the other person's social category, membership such as race, gender, and age, and their physical appearance. Another source of information in initial perception is nonverbal behavior. I forgot about that in covering that. This did talk about nonverbal behavior. Facial expressions, how close you speak to somebody, what their hands, what their feet, what their body language is. That influences how other people view us. These behaviors are also useful in helping us determine whether or not people are being honest with us. Although our ability to detect deception is often not very good, there are nevertheless some reliable cues that we can use to do so. Once we learn more about a person, we begin to think about them in terms of their personality traits. Often we average traits together to form an overall impression of the person. Some traits have more weight than others. For instance, negative traits, the central traits of warm and cold, and those traits that we learn first. I thought that was a cravat. It's an ascot? I think you're right. I think it is an ascot. What the hell's a cravat? Either way, send one and I'll wear it. I love looking foppish and silly. An important task of person perception is to attempt to draw inferences about a person's personality by observing the behavior. This is a process of causal attribution. When we make attributions, we make either personal attributions, situational attributions, or both. Austin Powers? I'll have to take a look and see the difference between a cravat and an ascot. We can make stronger personal attributions when behavior is unusual or unexpected, and when it is freely chosen. Remember the situation? If it appears that the behavior of a person is based off their own personal choice, not the situation that they're in. We have information about behavior over time. We can analyze consistency, distinctiveness, and consensus of that behavior to make attributions. In some cases, we may use the process of causal attribution to draw conclusions about the causes of success and failure. Our attributions are generally accurate, but they're subject to some biases. We tend to make too strong personal attributions for the behavior of others. This is who this person is because of who they are, which is known as the fundamental attribution error. And we make more personal attributions for others than we do for ourselves. It's a situation I was in. It's not my fault. The actor-observer effect. In some cases, this may lead us to blame others for events that they may not have been responsible for. Furthermore, we tend to make self-serving attributions, which are frequently inaccurate, but which do help us meet our needs for self-enhancement. Different individuals make different judgments about others, in part because they see those people in different circumstances, and in part because they use their own attitudes and schemas when they judge them. This can lead to people making more similar judgments about different people than different people make about the same person. Individual difference variables such as the need for cognition and entity versus incremental thinking can influence our person perception. There are also cultural differences in person perception. People from individualistic cultures or people from whom an individualistic culture is highly accessible tend to make stronger personal attributions and weaker situational ones in comparison with people from collectivistic cultures. Causal attributions for our own behaviors have an important outcome on our mental and physical health. Important concepts in this regard are attributional styles, learned helplessness, self-handicapping, and unrealistic optimism. There we have it, folks. That was all of Chapter 6, Perceiving Others. We learned not only does their behavior, our biases, their situations, our learned styles of perception, all of it goes into how we perceive others, how others perceive us. In keeping all of these things in mind, you could actually readily come up with a plan on how to positively or, I suppose, negatively influence a situation with others. So if you know that sitting openly will make people warm up to you faster, that's how you can do it. Even if it's somebody you don't like, if you need to possibly get something out of them, such as your boss. You may not like the person, may disagree with how they manage, but if you need to do something that's going to further your life, speak to them more warmly, be more open in a physical behavior-wise, meaning not arms crossed, look directly at them, smile, refer to them in positive aspects, refer to yourself in positive aspects. So build up that psychological defense, wall, offense, however you want to put it, to help your life progress in the manner that you want. So, love the psychology of this kind of stuff. Thinking about not only how things work on a psychological level for yourself, but how it works on social interactions with you and the others. A lot of times, I'd oftentimes thought of psychology was kind of the study of like depression and anxiety and all of the abnormal disorders. But, realistically, if you think about it, our psychology is who we are. It isn't just how we think, but it's how we act and how we behave and how we talk and how we interact in every part of our lives. Psychology is more than just statistics. And I kind of blame the psychological industry by and large for that misconception, because anytime you do read something from psychologists, I read a lot of blogs and news about psychology, and so much of it gets bogged down in paragraphs and paragraphs of very dry statistics without putting any like real world applications or uses for it, because a lot of times I have seen that it looks like psychologists fall in love with their findings more so than what it means. So very excited to see what more can be learned in psychology. The next two chapters, which unfortunately I won't have time to read before the exam, are over influencing and conforming. You know what? I will do that, influencing and conforming, because I've read a little bit about that, read up on it, because when I was looking over the chapters, that one would be very good for people that are streamers, especially if you are trying to influence and conform. And I may even do liking and loving, or at least bits of it out of there, just because of the topic. Who couldn't use a little bit more love in their life? But the influencing and conforming, definitely, because I think that have a good play for streamers who are looking to take advantage of psychology knowledge, in order to make a better stream, to be a better streamer, to have better influence. So, just taking a look. It's been 1 hour, 40 minutes on the stream today, which is a decent stream. I'm going to actually pop up here. Let's see. Kristen has popped something up. Difference between an ascot and a cravat. Difference between ascot and cravat. And you know what? It didn't look like anything nudie showed up when I did images, so I will pop this back over to the mainstream. The term ascot comes from the Royal Ascot horse race, where men would wear a looser cravat as part of their morning dress. That's why the ascot is often called a day cravat. Ha! That kind of makes me right. Because an ascot is a cravat. So I was right. Mostly. As a suitable wardrobe calls it. It is less formal, tied under the collar. Oh, I see what you did. You put my head on the Austin Powers picture. Oh, behave. So get some images. I think I'd look awesome with a cravat. Doesn't make you kind of right. It makes you less wrong. It is a cravat. But we'll also give you the win for that, too, for coming up with knowing that there was a difference. And that ascot also would work for it, because you're right, because it would also be an ascot. A day cravat. I like it. Ooh, I like this one. Niels, just think of me in that. If anybody has any Photoshop skills, let me know. I'll send you over pictures of me, and you can put me into them. How to tie an ascot. Did you guys just laugh? I was wearing an ascot for the next stream. Ooh, look at that one. That's a big old fatty there. This looks like a poorly tied tie. Those are all the same picture. It's like somebody's handkerchief that they stuck into their neck. All right. That puts an end to it for today. I am going to have to spend probably the next 4 or 5 hours studying the next 2 chapters, then doing a review of the exam. So thank you for everybody that stopped by, for everybody that hung out, for everybody that chatted. Thank you, Zeb and Harley, for coming to hang out for a little bit, and for throwing the streaming hosting my way. And Rezenka and Stormy, I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll get to see you guys come back sometime and discuss psychology with me. If not, I'll have to check out your streams as well and share the love. So that's it. We're going to give the extra to music since I'm so good at it. So we're going to go social psychology. You know, it was social psychology with Scott. Social psychology with Scott. Thanks for tuning in for these tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Oh, have a good one, Rosenka. I don't know what PogChamp. Oh, it's a face, but have a good afternoon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.